All right, I'll call to order the board meeting for Monday, December 10th. At the moment, we have all board members present except for Jamie Lewis Gonzalez. And first up, we have, I'm sorry, Bruce McMillan, there we go. And we'll just let you have at it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We really appreciate it, and we're really excited about the opportunity that this project presents as well for the community. I'm Dana Williamson with Bruce McMillan Architects. This is Bruce McMillan. We're going to just talk to you today a little bit about our team members.
These are score sheets for each presentation.
How we kind of see the project, basically show you we have a little bit of familiarity with it, and then Bruce is going to talk about our expertise and our experience, what we can bring to the project for you. And then we can discuss our initial thoughts on the approach to the project and the schedule, and then leave plenty of time for questions. Okay.
Well, thank you again. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And just a little bit of background about our firm. You've received the proposal, and so there's background information in there. But we've had the firm started in Manhattan 35 years ago. We had a Junction City office that we've had for 32. And then Dana had been one of my students at Kansas State University. And I've been adjunct at the university periodically over the last 40 years. And she came to me after class one day and she said, you know, I'd like to consider coming and joining your firm. And so we took her up on it. And here a couple of years ago, due to family situations, moved back to Dodge City, which is where Calvin, her husband, and the son, who everybody seems to know, except they don't know mom and dad. But Beckett is the life of the family at this point. And so they came back due to family considerations. And at the time, I thought, well, I'm going to lose her. But she offered to consider doing a satellite or a branch office here for us. And so I thought, you know, we might just do that. And so we were able to, with the help of the chamber and other folks here in town, we were welcomed very, very well. City Commission, we spoke with them as well. And so we opened the office here, and thankfully we're still moving forward. We have had, excuse me, the opportunity to work alongside an excellent team of consultants that we bring to you for this project. I toured the facility this afternoon so that I had seen it, but I had not actually walked it as well as we did this afternoon. And so we feel that we do bring some expertise to the project for you. And the folks that we are showing you here, top row, of course, myself, Dana, and Garrick Baker at our office in Manhattan. Mark Hodges is a structural engineer with Dudley Williams and Associates in Wichita. We've worked with that firm for most of the last 35 years, and we rely on them very, very heavily for our structural work. In the review that we've had this afternoon, we know that there could be some structural work involved, not just with the implementation of the locker rooms, restrooms, so forth, but we know that the booth up on top, you want to look at some expansion there. And that is going to take some additional structural evaluation, and how does that get implemented, and what impact is that going to have on the facility as it now stands. And as I said, we would rely heavily on Dudley Williams and Mark and his team to work through that with us. Tom Erasm, is there a pointer on here by chance? Yes, right here. Or maybe on...
Yeah, you got it. You just way up there.
Well, there we go. Tom Erasm and Brad Ross are with Erasm Scalora Engineering. They are based in Manhattan, but they work with us statewide. We have been doing not only work here in Dodge City, but we've also been working down in Ashland. We've been looking at other projects in this vicinity. We work up northeast in Marshall County, so we cover the state in the projects that we're doing. And Tom and Brad are highly qualified, and have been working with us since they opened the firm 30 years ago in Manhattan. Kurt Lancaster is right here in Dodge City with SMH Consultants, and are actually 2 doors down from us in the building we're at on 3rd. And Greg Fief with Schwab Eaton is based in the Manhattan office, but do quite a bit of work, and as I understand, have worked on the facilities here in Dodge City thus far. Quentin Conant with Conant Construction Company. We have been involved with several projects with Quentin, and the library project across the street is one of ours that we're currently working with them on. We finished Lemcooler Dentistry, and we're also looking at other projects with Quentin and his team as well. And if at any time you have questions for either Dana or myself, by all means, please insert as far as that's concerned. With respect to the actual design and the familiarity with the project, I'm going to let Dana focus on that for us. Now, which way do I go?
Yep.
This way. Aha. And with the familiarity, and she has a lot more familiarity with some of the components of this project than I would have ever imagined. But we'll let her walk through those for you. So.
Well, I have been to a few events at the stadium, mostly football, but middle school and high school. And because the way my brain works, I walk into a space and I'm looking at all the code and ADA issues. I'm like, oh, okay. So I can't turn it off, unfortunately. But the great thing about the stadium is that it has a really great structure. The original design has allowed it to function for many years. And with only some minor changes, it can function for many more years. And the great thing is that there is space for those changes that you want to make. And talking to people in the community, even before this project I was aware of the project, the stadium just has a lot of meaning to people in the community. So it's important that we make sure we do the right thing with the stadium. And Jeff, you're as familiar as anyone with the press box issues. So that will be a good asset as well if we continue moving forward and discussing those issues. There are some areas out of compliance that you've noticed, and we can discuss those as well. The parking lot issues, the ADA issues there. One of our team members noticed some drainage issues, and I know when I talked to Dr. Dirksen earlier that there have been some drainage issues noticed, but the one thing that he made a comment on was in the east side under the stands there. Sometimes there's some standing water, and we want to make sure, especially if we're going to be doing the phase 1 restroom and locker rooms over there, make sure to address those first so we don't spend a whole lot of money and then it just gets ruined by the standing water. So as you noted in your request for proposal, you want to do things in phases, maybe some phases together, but just however that might work for the community and for your needs. And we can definitely work with you on that. We do feasibility studies, and that's probably how we would propose to begin, and that way we could investigate all of the issues that you're looking at and work through how to prioritize them, how those work into a budget, and how those would phase according to schedules as well, because there are a lot of activities going on in the stadium that we'll probably need to work around. So those challenges that we really want to focus on would be to address the issues, as many issues as we can within a budget. And that would be something that we could work on together to determine. We want to make sure we schedule those priorities to meet those different deadlines. And then for that phase 1, I know when I talked to Dr. Dirksen, the Shrine Bowl is kind of a goal for phase 1. And so that would be something that we might have to fast track. And we can look at that later on down when we talk about our approach to the project.
Okay.
Bruce?
With respect to the, let me make sure I get this. There we go. I want to go to the next one.
Yeah.
There we go. A little bit of a background here on our team collaboration, the design skills that we bring to your project. and the cost control and the deadlines that we've had the opportunity most recently to work on a very large feasibility study and master plan for USD 383 in Manhattan in conjunction with the City Commission. The feasibility study actually is a large study to combine sports facilities with the school district and city-owned property and city-owned facilities. What we're showing you here is a series of study models that were completed for a bond issue that was just recently passed, $129.5 million bond issue. And the components we're working through that as well. A previous bond issue allowed for additions to the middle schools that will be combined gymnasiums and recreation centers for the city used by the school district for class and activity expansion, but then at a certain point in the day, then it reverts back to city use. And that's maybe 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon through the evening hours. And those are going to be additions to the middle schools. We have 2 middle schools in Eisenhower in the Manhattan USD 383. So we completed the entire feasibility study for that series of components. We also completed the feasibility for Seco Park. Seco stands for City County, and it is owned by the city, the county, and the school district. And it's carved up in a very unusual set of boundaries, if you will. But nonetheless, the complex that you see here is a new series of ball fields that went in, new concession, new locker rooms, new restrooms, new bleachers, new observation, new press box, as well as all new ball fields. So that is not part of the implementation at this time, but we have completed the overall study on that particular component. What you're seeing over here are simply rendered images for some of the components that came out of the feasibility study. We are currently working on an indoor recreation center for a southeast portion of the community. 3 recreation centers, the 2 attached to the middle schools, and the standalone, which is currently being reviewed for HUD funding through a community development block grant. So that is the one our firm is now working on. The bond issue is going to take care of the other 2 of the middle schools as far as that's concerned. The skills that we have brought to these projects are a direct result of our long-term working relationship with the Parks and Recreation Department for the City of Manhattan and the Community Development Department. We have been working with community development since the 1980s. Through Parks and Recreation, we began working with them in 1985. And so we have been consistently retained over these last number of years for projects for both departments at the city. And as maybe our original proposal indicated, we have done a considerable number of projects for USD 383, USD 320, which is Wamego, as well as we're working for St. Xavier's Catholic Schools in Junction City right now as well. So we bring that background to your project here and series of projects, as Dana has described, in a phased implementation process. All of these projects are going in as a phased implementation as well.
How deeply, excuse me,
I'm sorry, yes, sir.
how much involved were you in the redevelopment of the city of Manhattan back, gosh, in the 90s?
As far as the mall and
Yes,
and the north and south, basically, all of those situations were worked with on outside firms. There really was no local firm
Okay, I was
in
just curious.
Manhattan that did the mall, that was a developer. The North District, where Hy-Vee is and everything, that was a developer.
Right.
In the South District, which is the Arts District, again, a
Makes
series
sense.
of developers. So,
No, that makes sense.
Okay.
I got you.
okay. The needs of each of the projects that, excuse me, we've identified have been thoroughly researched, and we've gone through these on an individual basis. The school district, as well as the city, met a multiple number of times on these projects as well. A lot of the projects that we've done over the years have been maintenance projects. I mean, parking lots, we've done a zillion parking lots for USD 383. We've done bleachers, we've done window replacement. A lot of maintenance projects have gone through our firm for the school districts that we've worked on over the years. The collaboration that I've mentioned with our team members before, we've worked through those with all of these firms that we've represented here this evening as well. We're known for quality design. The working drawings that we bring to a project have been observed to be some of the most detailed, highest quality, and fewest callbacks, clarifications, and for other issues. We have very close working relationship with our local contractors, and we use firms specifically when we have the opportunity, and we understand that this is probably could be a competitively bid project. We have a contractor on board with us on that. However, that is for cost estimating purposes at this time. But we understand that there may be competitive bidding, and we're very comfortable with that as well as far as that's concerned. Deadlines, we have been very cognizant of those kinds of issues as we have worked through these projects as well. The documents are checked, double-checked. Our consultants cross-check our documents, we cross-check their documents to be sure that we haven't lost something in a loophole someplace as far as that's concerned. Are there any other questions at this point?
Dana, would you be the lead on this project?
Yes.
Yes. We have other folks in the firm as well, and we have all of our document preparation is electronic through CAD systems, and we can plot, print, we can do everything all through a single server. That allows us to keep everybody in the loop on what is going on as far as that's concerned with projects. Go to the next slide. Okay. We'll do a tag team on this one here. As far as the similar facilities are concerned, again, these are projects that I've mentioned that this project is one of the middle schools with the recreation and gymnasium component here that would be attached or on an adjacent parcel for one of the recreation centers here at one of the middle schools. This project is actually a predecessor to the Southeast Neighborhood project that we're working on, 17,000 square feet. Standard court, 2 cross courts, pickleball, volleyball are included in that as well. Where am I? Locker rooms and restrooms, yes. My pointer's not pointing. Am I dead? Maybe. In the upper right,
You're way up there.
I'm way up there.
There you go.
There we go, okay. That is a project that we did for the city in conjunction with this auditorium renovation, which we have just finished. And this is all done through a veterans organization that is honoring those World War II veterans from Riley County. Here is the gymnasium at the East Campus for the high school. With an addition, we redid that in the last bond issue, and then a large pavilion and outdoor stage area as well. And so those are just some similar projects that we've had the opportunity to work on as well.
So our initial thoughts on how we might approach the project, going back to the phase one and how we might fast track that. That is going to be pushing it, but I think we've worked out a schedule that is pretty doable, and I've spoken with Quentin Conant, and he thinks it's doable as well. So as long as we can make decisions and everything goes right, which, you know, construction. But if just thinking about getting the contracts approved by the end of the year, we can get started in the new year, get going on schematic design in January, and maybe get everything approved, start working on construction documents through February. And we've got 2 weeks in March, the first 2 weeks of March for bidding, and then that leaves 2.5 months for construction. And then we're done before the Shrine Bowl. So, like I said, well, our design philosophy is that we want to make sure your needs are met. And that means within the design, not just how it looks, but how it functions as well. Also with finance and also with your timeline, all of those needs. So we have to make sure those all coordinate. And this fast track schedule is our attempt at addressing that need. Any questions on that? All right, so then after design is finished on the phase one and it's under construction, we can start thinking about the rest of the identifying the rest of the issues, maybe starting on that feasibility study. That starts with meetings with you, with other key stakeholders, and working on identifying all the issues, investigating, make sure we have everything covered, and then we can get into schematic design in early or late spring of next year. Work through design development and construction documents through the summer and the fall. And then it looks like we've shown maybe starting contract administration, working with the contractor, finding a contractor at the new year of 2020. And then once we get a contractor, we can work with them to figure out that schedule to work around all the events and all the people who need to use the stadium while it's under construction. Bruce, do you have anything to add to that?
No, only that we're very cognizant of how much use this facility gets. And when we were in there even this afternoon, there were...
The college track team.
Track team, okay, was in there. And so the gate was open, by the way. We didn't anticipate that, but the gate was open. So it was all secured, but we had an opportunity to really see what is physically there. And the structure, as Dana said, looks to be just in very good condition. And other than the press box, we may need to address how that modification might be taken into consideration there as far as that's concerned. But
well, with that, we'll open it up for questions.
On the phase one, that's a pretty strict timeline. You know, that's a pretty strict timeline. What would be the problems to meeting that pipe? I mean, would weather hold you up? I'm just asking questions.
Sure. I think some of the initial problems would be during the design if we have problems making decisions on what is involved in that design, and that's within the design team, or that's between the design team and you. But I mean, those are easily overcome. But another problem that might come up is that drainage issue under the east stands that we talked about. It could be an easy fix. It could be a much bigger fix. And if it's a bigger fix, obviously that's gonna.
Could you determine the method, I mean, how big a fix it was? Is that by observation, or do you have to really get into it first?
We wouldn't have to totally get into it, but there'd have to be investigative measures taken.
Okay.
we would certainly want our civil consultant to
Right.
take a look at this. And obviously, there needs to be some type of a subsurface drain issue of some kind that might have to go in there. If we can't get a slope or something that would work with that pavement that's under there, we'd have to get into some type of a subsurface arrangement, I would imagine.
And his initial thought was it looked like there just wasn't a drain that was working, or maybe it was clogged or something, so just looking into the drainage issues that are there, yeah.
At the risk of being a lone soldier out here, I'll hide my face when I say this, but if the Shrine Bowl isn't the end-all to end-all, and we're not building for the Shrine Bowl, we're building for USD 443 in my mind, will what we get done before that deadline that you've marked off that is the Shrine Bowl, I can feel daggers already from high school, but will we be able to have a quality project? What I'm saying is I don't want to just mishmash. I want it to be, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. And let's do it not in a rush for any particular one event, but so that it'll be a great facility so that in another 50 years, if somebody wants to build on and improve it even more, they can.
Yeah.
But that's my concern. Will it be okay, we do this, and then we have to undo this to do this, and then we have to undo this to do, will it be one of those?
No, I mean, that would not be our goal. Every time we do one of these phase projects, we try as hard as we can up front to figure out, okay, what needs to be done in this first phase so that we're not undoing as we do continuous phases. That's just a waste of money and time.
I
So,
would like for the school boards 50 years from now to say what you said,
Yeah.
that they did a good job
Right.
50 years ago, because that's great to know that we have a great structure still. It'd be worse if we were talking about, some really significant structural problems.
And that's not going to crimp our style and how we build anything. We say, oh, you can't do that now because we already did this. We can still,
So would you say what we proposed for phase one is a reasonable start, a doable thing then to progress with?
ask it.
Logically, if that is a goal to get, and it's working with the locker rooms, it's working with the restrooms and getting those are defined spaces right now. And with that being there, you've got the four walls already to work with. And depending upon, again, labor availability and construction availability, weather, and so forth, there should be enough time, because you've already got all of the plumbing is already there, as long as anything subsurface is still in good shape, then rearranging should not be an enormous, difficult problem to get that done. We have obviously not investigated exactly what all of the existing ramifications are, but the point to start with, you have the infrastructure, I guess is what I'm saying, to make that possibly work.
Tammy and Pamela bring up a good point, though. If we had no timeline, okay, would you still recommend to us that we do these three phases in this order? I mean,
if you had no set timeline, I would probably recommend that all of your phases be investigated in an initial feasibility study first, so that you can make sure they all fit together, make sure they're in the right priority, done at the right
that's what
time.
I'm asking. Is this the right priority to get the best job we can? I think that's what.
That's what we're asking.
He's asking for a comprehensive feasibility study tonight.
And it really depends on what your goals are.
Yeah, that's true, but I just don't want to do step 3 first, if it caused some structural problem.
Yeah,
I don't see,
That's a good point.
well, the press box.
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Well, the press box, if we eventually do that, and especially with potentially an elevator going in, that, where would that elevator go?
Yeah.
It might go in there, in one of those areas. I mean, that's just something we don't know. So that is a potential conflict.
Can you do the feasibility study overall first? And then you
That's what
break
I
it into 3 phases?
Or however many phases,
Or-
yeah. There wouldn't be, I don't think there would be time to do the feasibility study
No time.
before that timeline, but, I mean, that's up to
We
you whether that's an
typically-
important.
Right,
Again-
you're right.
We can fast-track a feasibility study. However, the feasibility study depends upon the decision-making process that goes into that feasibility study. And what are, as Dana just said, what are your priorities? If you are clear, concise, and you can give us the direction that you cumulatively have, we can fold right into that. But I'm not sure if I'm hearing different opinions or not, but the more concise and the more direction the board has among yourselves, the easier it's going to be for us to give you the follow-up direction that you're asking for, if that makes sense.
I think the only thing that I'm concerned about is you mentioned the elevator. You know, if we just knew the things that, where step 1 would affect step 2, phase 3, and that there were no conflicts, we could do phase 1 standalone, and we wouldn't have to rip anything out we did in phase 1 to do 2 and 3.
No.
And the same thing with 2 and 3.
You don't want to tear something out that you've already done.
Right,
Absolutely.
and that's what I'm saying.
We understand that the press box is too small, is what we understand. Depending upon, and then the trigger on that one though is, yes, you've got a good structure there. Until we get our structural engineer in to look at the column support for what is there, can it carry more? Do we have to beef that up? Does it have to come down in order to enlarge a press box there? Or what does your ideal press box look like? I'm not sure we know that yet. And so that is going to have to weigh pretty heavily into the actual process as we look at how that elevator and that component play into the overall picture. As I mentioned a moment ago, the locker rooms and the restroom configurations and that switching around, I don't see those things moving. I think those are there. And building an elevator tower of some kind to get up to that press box, yes, it's going to be messy because you're going to be tearing some things out. But I don't see that, and I said this to Dana when we were walking around, and I could be way off base here. I see that sort of going on the back side, if there's room to do it, of the whole structure so that we're not punching holes through the stadium, through the bleachers and all that. I think that's the only way to get that in there and get it behind the structure that's already there somehow.
Right.
But I'm just assuming some things now. So to answer that question, I don't see the impact. But that's the big elephant in the room in some capacity here.
Right. That's,
What's the biggest project you guys have worked on with Conant Construction?
Or was One Coolers? Yeah.
First dental, probably,
Okay.
was about $500,000.
Okay.
The library's not finished yet, so we don't have,
Right.
but it's close.
Okay, any other questions?
very good, thank you.
All right.
We appreciate your time greatly.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have 2 more presentations that will be following after this one, and then tonight, later in the agenda, we do look towards the ranking, because I like what you said about trying to work with getting contracts and getting it moving so that we can move forward. So we'll be in touch this week, I'm sure. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Thanks for
certainly
coming.
appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for the chance to be here and visit with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got, up next is the architect, and we'll just turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate, we'll get this right here. We appreciate your inviting us over here, and it looks like a very interesting project and probably one that's well past due. And we appreciate being selected as one of your 3 finalists on that. I'm Bruce Glass, and the owner of The Architect, and this is Manuel Ortiz. He's my project manager and computer guru. I have been practicing in Garden City and Dodge City in southwest Kansas for about 43 years now, and have been coming to Dodge City. It's a well-traveled road back and forth since I got here in '75. So even though we're stationed in Garden City, I don't feel that Garden City, Dodge City Liberal is that big of a competition when it comes to architectural work. Done a whole lot of work in Dodge City, and I'd like to do a whole lot more, so
Just on Friday nights.
that's, well,
Just on
yeah.
Friday nights.
You just can't determine which is the front yard and the backyard. Backyard, side yard, we're all still in the same neighborhood.
So we put together a little slideshow to kind of go through some of these projects that we had listed in our proposal in a little more depth. So I'll let Manuel do the clicking here, and I'll kind of give a description. So one of the projects it's a recreational project. It's for the Garden City Rec Commission, and it's one of those where they're taking an old building and going to try to renovate it for gymnastics. And this is kind of the existing building. It was a rent-to-own building, and it's pretty basic. And what we did for them was they weren't real sure of their funding when we started this project. So we did 3 different options for them. One was a basic, just minimal remodel. The next one was upgrade what they had but not add on. And the third one, which they're kind of leaning towards here and hoping to get, is an addition to the front of it. The advantage there was it gave them a 20-foot tall area for the high bars, which they really needed. And so it was one of those good, better, and best options that they had. And I could see that same kind of option for you folks on your stadium. There's how far do you want to go with things? And so this is the option they're leaning for, and they should know by about the middle of the month if their board approves that one. But it's a dramatic difference in the look of the whole thing. And so what for them it does is it builds the enthusiasm for their program, and they figure that they'll probably double the size of their program just because they have a better facility. This was another one where we just recently finished. It was an old convenience store on the west side of Garden City, and they just bulldozed it and came up with a new one on that facility. So that was one of those where what they had, they could have built around it, but to be cost effective, it was going to cost more for them to try to use the existing rather than gut it out, tear it down, and rebuild part of it. There's another one that we just completed. This is over by the Garden City Community College campus, and it was built as a Morton building as a bank about 15 years ago. And it was acquired by the Grant County Bank, and we redid the facade and pretty much gutted the interior to give it a whole facelift. And so that's an actual photo. The one before was the rendering we had done on it. So it turned out pretty well. Except for the lighting in there, for some reason, it turned yellow. It doesn't look that yellow in reality. Here in Dodge City, one of the recreational facilities that probably real closely matches what you're trying to do was the Long Branch Lagoon. And we were responsible for the locker rooms, the concessions, administrative building, and then also the building out back of the park that houses all the pumps and filtration system that runs the whole system. And we thought it turned out pretty well. It was a nice, fun project because the theme was going to be tying into historic Dodge City, and so we were able to pick up the brick and the detailing of a lot of the buildings downtown. Both Manuel and I were involved with that project and this one. This one was a design-build project with Building Solutions, and Ford County acquired a very large metal building that originally was going to be a manufacturing facility in Scott City, and it didn't go through. And so our task was to use that building, and we added on all the toilets and the facility rooms in the front, and then the horse and arena on the side of it there. And then at one point, the college was looking at moving equestrian and horse science and animal science out to that area, so we had done a master plan for that. They ended up not doing that, but we're good at kind of planning ahead also, and that may have some implications with what you're trying to do too, with the different phases and how things work best. So it's not necessarily just a matter of, yeah, we'll do this one, this one, this one, because phase one may implicate how you do phase two and phase three and phase four. And so planning on how to do all those is one of the things I really like to do. So that's a good project to compare it to. This is a building down at the Finnop. It's the Finnop Center, which is an education building and the zoo offices, Lee Richardson Zoo. I don't know if any of you had been into it, but it turned out to be a really nice building. We used simple products in there. It was just split face block, and we painted it, but it was kind of the detailing to give it kind of the park atmosphere and make it fun for kids, because that was primarily who were serving with the education stuff. So we had some bright colors in some of the rooms, and they have really enjoyed it over the years. That one started out, the zoo director thought, well, you know, maybe a 80 by 100 metal building, and I said, no, you deserve better than that. So they were very happy when it was done. I've been involved with historic preservation for a lot of years. I've served on Garden City's Landmark Commission since its inception about 15 years ago. Have done quite a few historic buildings, both new and remodeled. So this one was the visitor center down on Wyatt Earp, and it was an all-new building, but they definitely wanted it to have the feel of an old train station. At the time, the Santa Fe station, they probably would have liked to have it, but it was kind of a mess at that time. So they opted for a new building that kind of replicated a train station over by Boot Hill. And that was kind of a fun project to do. The Hoover Pavilion was one of those that we phased over about a 7-year period with the city. Paul Lewis and I worked together real close on that one, and it had just been neglected and abused for a lot of years, but they saw the potential that it had to be basically a moneymaker for the city. And so we systematically went in and redid the entire thing and upgraded the roof, upgraded the mechanical and air conditioning system, all new windows and floor, ceiling, and it had all new toilets and a serving kitchen in it. This, again, historical, this was an old building in downtown Garden City that in the 70s had the aluminum slipcover put over it. And they knocked off most of the good historical reference points when they did that. And the guy with Kenny Glass that I have coffee with every now and then said, yeah, when I came back to Garden City, that was the first project, and they just gave us a sledgehammer and said, knock everything off that's in the way. And I about spit my coffee out at him at that point. But it was one of those, there was enough historical detail left on it that we were able to recreate, recast some of those missing members. And it turned out as a pretty good addition to downtown Garden City. So this was another large one here in Dodge City at the community college, the old student union. It had 2 elevators in it, but it was built before ADA. And so someone in a wheelchair couldn't get into the building to use any of the elevators. And the back of the building, if you recall, it was a loading dock and the air conditioning and no entrance. So what we ended up doing was a not real large addition to it, but it made a big difference on just basically flipping the entrance to it, especially for the students, because they would come across from the dorms and have to go up those big flights of stairs on either side to get into the student union. So we put a little addition onto the west side of it and basically gutted all of student services and redid that. Plus the books, moved the bookstore upstairs. And the president at the time liked it so much that he confiscated one of the conference rooms that was on the main floor and made it his office and suite. So that has to say something about how well they liked it. In Garden City at the community college, the father of one of the students at the baseball team was a big baseball fanatic, and Garden City at the time didn't have much more than a sand lot as a field, so he donated quite a bit of money to them, and we came up with Williams Field. And it had, for the time, exceptional lighting because he thought they should televise it all in color, so you need a high degree of lighting. And, done over the years, quite a few schools, K through 12. The Holcomb High School, I worked on the original one, and then the large addition here that they did in 2000. And then the middle school, both the original and the addition to it, that involved gyms and locker rooms and concession. And then the K-12, K-2 school that was across the street from their old existing one. So one of the nice things about computers is that it allows us to do things that would have just taken forever to do before in a fairly quick order. And one of the easier things to do with the 3D programs we have is modeling renderings for you so you can see whether you like something ahead of time and what it may look like in fairly realistic terms. With the stadium, a lot of what you're looking at is down under. And so a rendering of toilets that may not be as sexy as some of these other ones, but it does give you a fairly good idea. Some capabilities that we have on that. And so, for instance, in your phasing, when we were waiting in the boardroom and with your information, it appears there may be some options, questions, what can we do on the south end and the north end, and it may come down to how many toilets can we get by code on each side, and do we still have room for locker rooms and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of things that whoever you hire will need to look at, and some of them would be outside of that underneath the stands area. So some good renderings at that point can help you sell it to the public, sell it to yourselves, and kind of fine tune what do we want this facility look like, since not much has been done since 1967.
The slideshow.
That's the end of the slideshow. So, like I say, the experience that I've had in this area goes back a long ways. We've worked with every contractor in southwest Kansas. We've done traditional design bid build work. We've done construction management work. We've done design build work. They all have kind of their strengths and weaknesses. And I believe you've done quite a bit of CM work in the last few years. CM has some advantages if done right, and it has no advantages if it's not done right. So the selection of a contractor for a CM project is really pretty important. But we're capable of doing it with any of them. All boards work a little bit different, so there's no standard way of our working with you. And I'm pretty easygoing, so for instance, on the bottom of all my drawings, it has a little box that says, if in doubt, ask. Because a contractor has a 50-50 chance of getting it right or wrong. And unlike some of my colleagues who kind of sit on a pedestal, I'm a fairly humble guy, so I always figure it's a whole lot easier just ask the question before you do it, and it saves everybody a whole lot of hassle and time. So it's always kind of my philosophy is working with you, asking what you really want is the very first step, and then working with you, and then within the budget that you would like to work in with. So my philosophy has just always been, you don't have to be an expert to do a lot of these things. You just have to listen and use common sense. And honestly, toilets and locker rooms are something I've done a lot of, but not a single one of them has been the same. So working with you to figure out what best applies to your needs and the other people who will use the stadium is probably the best way to go, and the way I would definitely work with you.
So do you feel like phase one that we're wanting done and the timeline is a doable thing?
You know, the June timeline for doing everything you would need for code would be a challenge. And the very first thing to sit down with you would be, are you going to select a construction manager? And if so, then they would need to get on board pretty quickly. Or do you want to go with a design bid and build? And so the phasing part of it kind of depends on how you would structure it. Would it be separate projects with separate contractors? Or would it be one contractor that you're working with several phases? And depending upon which way you wanted to go on that would depend on how we worked things. Because if you were to bid things out in separate phases over, say, 3 years, then it would be tough for any contractor to kind of maintain personnel and budgets and that sort of thing. So the phasing of it is something that we would definitely want to discuss with you. The logistics of the phasing, and then the contracting of the phasing. So looking at your phases, there may be a couple of them that would be fairly easy to break out as separate contracts, but a couple of them may want to be one contract with one contractor, but they schedule it in different times, because you still have to keep the facility open and going. So it's not like you can shut it down and do all the toilets and all the locker rooms and then reopen it. So that phasing is part of the planning that would be really important on how our end of the work proceeds. One of the problems you've got is that the number of toilets you have per code is way under what would be required. And so how to meet that, the desire to keep them all underneath the stands, we understand that, but it's kind of a logistics thing with the locker rooms. Is it best to relocate temporarily locker rooms, or build locker rooms first, maybe somewhere else, or utilize other facilities in town? Halftime is the problem if there's no locker room there. So there are a lot of different options, and some of them are maybe better than others, but that's the sort of thing we just kind of sit down. What I like to do on things like that is make two lists. One is what you want to do, and then the different options. So here's option one, and you list the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. And so when you get down to the end of the advantages and disadvantages, is which one best meets your need. So there are a lot of things you can do with a fast track, but it ends up costing you a whole lot more money. And so then it's your decision, do we spend that extra money to fast track, and what does it gain us? Because there's a whole lot of things in a fast track, especially one for a June deadline, that can get sidetracked by unforeseen circumstances. But that's part of our job, is to kind of come up with these different options and the different pros and cons of each option, and then let you try to decide which one works best for you.
Have you had any preliminary views of the stadium? Have you inspected anything and had any insight?
We came over for the inspection. It was a good tour. Over the years, I've been to the stadium multiple times, but you don't pay much attention to things when you're coming over for a football game as you would, trying to look at it architecturally on what we can and cannot do to certain parts of it. The structural engineer we're proposing to use was the one who originally helped Gertner design the building, so they're familiar with it. The mechanical, electrical engineers that we're looking at using have done quite a bit of work with your school district and in Dodge City. So the team that we're putting together, I think, they're not just brand new. They're not unfamiliar with Dodge City or your facilities. So it's a good team. And I've worked with all of them, well, with the structural engineer since I graduated. And the gal that was in your packet in the proposal has just she'll become the president of the company in January. So the existing president, who's kind of in my class, is retiring. But I've worked with Desiree for a lot of years. So it's one of those with the engineers you use is, you know that they're a good engineer when they can kind of complete your sentence. So we're kind of on the same wavelength on what needs to be done on things. And they know what questions to ask. They know what questions I'll ask. So it makes working with them and the design they come up with for you a whole lot easier and better that way.
Have you guys discussed a timeline or kind of a plan of action for phase one if we go with you?
Yeah, we've talked about it quite a bit, and it really kind of depends on how you want to handle the locker rooms. The home side is a little tighter. It has a lot more stuff under it. And so the logistics there are a little trickier. The visitor side has a whole lot of open space underneath it, and so it becomes a lot easier to start adding things into there that don't interfere with what's already there. And kind of like I said, sitting down with pros and cons on several different options is probably going to be our best bet on really coming to a conclusion on what's best for coming up with the phasing on this. Track people, it's a lot of use, but it's not the same intensity of use as football games. So football games, people show up, they get something to drink, and they sit in the stands, and most people all hit the toilets at the same time at halftime. And so it's kind of the big rush deal, whereas track, they don't have the same requirements either in locker room facilities or in toilets or concessions that football does. So football is kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to logistics and scheduling and that sort of thing. With track events, you can kind of work around it a little bit better with those scheduling items, but football, that's the challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Am I forgetting anything?
What construction company are you working with?
Which one do you want?
Would be actually, huh? Which one do you want? Yeah.
We've worked
Sure,
with, we've worked
cheaper
with
and
all
best.
kinds, we've worked with
I mean,
everyone.
Yeah, so here in Dodge, I mean, going way back with Rhodes Construction and Western Construction, we work with Conant, we work with Building Solutions, we work with JAG. People come and go with each company, and so in our field, it's Southwest Kansas, so you're always going to be working with these contractors. So it's one of those that you tend to figure out details instead of getting hot-headed with anybody. And it's an advantage, well, it's a necessity both for the contractors and the architects in Southwest Kansas. And honestly, instead of being polarized, it's an advantage because we know we have to work with each other all the time. So we tend to find a solution that works for the owner, works for the contractor, and works for the architect when things come up. Because they're honestly are just a bunch of hard-headed architects in some of the metro areas. It's their way or the highway, and that doesn't always work for the best interest of the client or the architect or the contractor. So you just have to be a little copacetic. The contractors in Garden City work in Dodge City all the time, and vice versa. I mean, the project that I've had with Conant was in Garden City, and we've kind of worked with them a little bit on a couple of projects in Dodge, but haven't been successful on those, getting the project. But Building Solutions, same way, Garden City, Dodge City. And there's a lot of other good contractors in the area. So if you were to go with, say, the traditional design bid build, then it would be up to you whether it's open to statewide or regional. We understand that the two options you have for contracting is either traditional design bid build with the low bidder or construction management at risk. Unlike some of the other entities who can do design build, so.
Pamela, what was your question?
I was just going to ask, you didn't mention anything about an elevator up to the press box, or how much of that certainly would be a big cog to get finished by June, I would guess.
Well, so when ADA came along, they did not make any distinctions between big press boxes and big stadiums and little press boxes. And they just said, a press box has to be accessible. And right after that, I was working down in Montezuma, and they had basically some bleachers and kind of a little wooden shed, and wanted to redo the wooden shed. And I checked with the state, and they said, nope, if they redo a press box, there has to be an elevator to it. I'm going, surely there has to be some sensibility or compromise. And the only real out for them was that the value of an elevator would far outweigh the value of their whole stadium, honestly. So, but they opted, because the folks at the state at the time were pretty obstinate about that, so they opted not to do it. Memorial Stadium is a large enough facility that if you were to do something with the press boxes, then an elevator to it would be one of those things that you pretty much have to do. Now, the advantage to doing that is you could add another stop so that folks in wheelchairs are not, so they're not limited to that one platform you have now. And in the 2010 ADA, they did prescribe certain amounts of seats throughout a stadium. So having that elevator gives you the opportunity to fully meet it with ADA. Now, the other thing about it is there's not a whole lot that's code compliant about the stadium anymore. Toilets, press boxes, the stairs to the press box, that's kind of pretty scary, actually, but is how far Dodge City's code officials will say you have to go in and upgrade on that. But I think that's one of those things that we have a pretty good relationship with Kevin over at the city on that. Something that's reasonable is going to be probably acceptable to them. It's kind of the same way with your visitor side. If you had everybody in the seats all the time, then the number of toilets over there they're also way understaffed. Mm-hmm. But the occurrence of that, except for when both Dodge and Garden have really good teams and it's very competitive, or when you have a special event like you're coming up with in June, then chances are you don't have a full set of seats filled up over there. So if you can use some empirical data on the number of occupants in that area, you may be able to, reduce the number of toilets on the visitor side some. But whether they would make you update your press box to ADA if you're doing that much work below is something that they probably would say you have to do. Sure. But if you didn't want to do it, or you put it in phase 4 or 5, and they may let you get by. But that's kind of a negotiating point.
It's in phase 1, though.
It's not in phase 1.
I think we start with the restrooms and the locker rooms, and then we move to that.
Accessibility to press boxes has been one of those ADA things that is just a real challenge. And a lot of times they say, well, can we have another press box lower? And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. So, but technically, your main press box should be accessible.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think that's all the questions we've got. Later on in our regular meeting, we anticipate giving direction which way we're going, and Dr. Dirksen, will you be in touch, or Mr.
Yes,
Hammond? Or, yeah.
We'll be notifying everyone, because we do understand in trying to get any of these phases completed appropriately, we've got to get things moving right away. So we won't beleaguer in notification to make sure that you're aware. And we appreciate your presentation and your willingness to be a part of our district, and we're grateful for your presentation tonight.
I mean, 43 years out here, and you've kind of had some other folks doing most of your work, and we've been envious for a lot of years, but so we really appreciate the opportunity to do some of the work for you. Very capable we think it would be a really fun project to do, and it's a very visible project for you at the district and your patrons and the city of Dodge City. So we're kind of in Garden, but we're definitely local. So
And you can say we're the backyard. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Thank you very
Oh.
much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Our third group is Architecture Plus, and we will just let you have at it.
Thank you. I'm Blaine Davis from Architecture Plus, and I have with me Natalie Cox, which several of you probably know Natalie. She's from Dodge City here and so forth. So she's going to be my technical person and kind of run the show here. But first of all, I want to just thank you for this opportunity to visit with you about your stadium project and so forth. Couple things I wanted to mention. You saw our brochure that you judged us to be one of the three finalists on. And so there's a couple things I wanted to mention that wasn't in the brochure. We have been involved in several similar projects, maybe not as large a scale as your project. I did the Scott County Fairgrounds Rodeo Arena renovations on their grandstand a few years back. I did a press box for the Kingsley High School that they actually built in their shop class, which was kind of an interesting thing. We've done some locker rooms for the YMCA, both in Garden City, doing some renovation of the locker rooms at the Dodge City YMCA, hopefully to get that project started real soon. We've done some other projects in and around Dodge City. Recently, I was involved in the interior renovation of Boot Hill Distillery, did the interior renovations of Prime on the 9, and did an addition to Western Beverage. And probably two of the larger projects that you folks have done in your community. I was the associate architect on the raceway with Yates Kreitzberg out of Concord, North Carolina. And then also I was the associate architect on the Ford County Jail with HMN out of Kansas City. So I've had some experience in the community and worked in the community for quite a few years. In fact, we had an office here for 20-some years in the Fidelity State Bank building, and they needed some more space, so we kind of gave that back to them. So we have been a part of Dodge City for quite a while. What we did is we kind of wanted to look at your project, and we were following essentially the 5 phases that you've talked about in kind of designing a master plan of what we might be able to do with the stadium and the facilities around it. Of course, the stadium was originally built in 1967 and hasn't had a whole lot of attention spent on it over the years, and it's held up really well, though. So what we've kind of did is we've kind of went through and looked at updating the restrooms and the locker rooms as a first phase of this. And as we see those are underneath the grandstands, both on the home side, being the west side, and on the east side, where the visitors are. This here is the west side, and what we're looking to do is expand the locker room to handle 90 football players. So we have a pretty good size situation there on the left, and then increase the restrooms and so forth to meet the stadium capacity on the right-hand side there. Also, we have a trainer room there which can meet the head trauma protocol area as well, so we have added that in there. And then we're looking at possibly renovating the concession stand or updating the concession stands as well. So we've actually kind of taken a real hard look at what you have now and have actually come up with some design concepts. Not that these are the ones that you have to pick, but it kind of gives you an idea of what can be done with the facility. In looking at, this is the locker room, and we've kind of said we wanted this to be the home locker room, and it was kind of brought to our attention that we needed to be able to handle 90 athletes. We have the training room, and then we're needing to put a roof over that training room and that other area as well where the additional lockers are, and climate control that. So the bottom part of that is actually not finished space now, so we'll have to do some more additional work there as well. The bathroom count here, as we've increased the restroom count both for the men's and women's, and then we also provided 2 family restrooms as well. In visiting with the city of Dodge City, they were willing to let us design around 3,500 capacity for the stadiums and a 15% less than that. Actually, we all know that we could probably seat as many as 5,000 there, but they're willing to let us work with a little lesser number, so that governs how many toilets and how many urinals and how many laboratories we need and so forth. So that's kind of where we came up with those numbers there in the remodeling of those areas there. Now, on the east side, we just have 2 small restrooms, and we have a storage area and a concession area. We're going to take about storage area. It has quite a few lawnmowers and other pieces of equipment stored in there. Not quite sure why. When you have artificial turf, you need all those old lawnmowers. So we're saying let's clean that out and let's utilize that space.
That's a special project.
So we're going to take that storage space that's got lawn equipment in it and expand that and create us a visitor's locker room, again, with a capacity of up to 90 athletes as well. Do some renovations to the concession stand, and then also looking at increasing a few more numbers there in our restroom facility as well. And so then looking at this overall view here, we're kind of looking at a situation that on the right-hand photo there is a platform, and that's where the handicap seating is now. And as we all know, that's not compliant. In fact, you need to integrate the handicap seating into all levels of the seating that's there. So when you think about that, that means you need to have handicap seating on your visitor side as well as your home side. And the other thing is, if you have reserved seating, those should have some handicap stalls as well. Back to that number that we talked about with 3,500 capacity, the ADA standards of 2010 would require us to have 26 wheelchair spaces with an accompanying seat as well. So but if we need to do 26, then we've got to intersperse those amongst the stands on both sides of the field. And quite frankly, when we could talk about our press box in the future here, we're talking about an elevator to that press box. That will help us get people to the stands. I'm not sure what we're going to do on the east side with stands of another elevator. So yeah, that's a kind of an area we'll talk about in the future here, though. But that's kind of one of the things that we wanted to bring up is the handicap situation really creates some havoc for us, and there's no leeway in that. In fact, it's a, and you probably all know this, it's a civil rights scenario, and if somebody feels like they're being discriminated against, they just need to visit the county attorney, and then you suddenly have a lawsuit. So there's no grandfather, there's no way around it. It's just one of those things we have to address.
So you're saying that if we put an elevator on the home team side, that, or we have to have a way, an elevator, a lift, or something to get people to those same type seats on the visitor side,
Well, if I'm a visitor and I'm in a wheelchair, I want to sit with my team.
right?
And so that would be a discriminatory thing if you didn't provide them a space for that. And so that's the snag you run into there.
Yep.
And so,
You've
yeah,
ruined my day.
I don't like it any better than
I
you
know.
guys do.
I know.
I once I was at a meeting, and it was some county commissioners, and they kind of jumped to me and said, "You architects have created this." I said, "No. I'd rather be designing stuff on a fresh piece of paper than having to figure out how we can get people into your building and so forth." So,
Right.
yeah, it's a problem, and it's one of the few things that was mandated by the federal government that had no additional funding to help it. There was no funding created for that. You know, just as you do it, or we'll find a way to make you do it.
You said 26 handicap spaces. Is that each side? Or
No, that's total for your whole
state?
complex,
Okay.
with 3,500 seating. Now, if we go to 5,000 seats, which we think it would easily handle, then we need 10 additional to that, so it'd be 36. So, But the city's willing to work with us on that 3,500 number. So that's kind of what we're basing our ideas on right now. Okay, phase two is kind of the stadium enhancements. And the pictures we see here, the blue floor, that's in the concession stand on the west side of the home stadium. And that's water on the floor there, and it's coming through that brick wall that you see essentially on the right-hand side there. That is a single-width brick wall, and it's in very, very, very poor shape, and we're having lots of issues with water migrating through that. Whenever we get water in that and it freezes and thaws, it pops more brick off and so forth. We think that needs to be probably removed and addressed with a new wall system, which would, again, help us get rid of the water problem that we have inside there. That's just one of the stadium enhancements. One of the other big things that we know is the restrooms, concessions, and those four things have a concrete roof deck, which you see here in the two pictures. Over top of them, below the stadium risers themselves, and you can see kind of debris and ugliness there. That is pigeon droppings. Pigeons are really a mess up there. We're looking at ways we can kind of enclose that space and kind of prevent that from happening. And so we would screen those areas in and become more of a decorative element and then get rid of that issue we have there. Of course, there is some things being stockpiled and stored up there that probably need to be dealt with as well. This is looking at the restrooms and on the west side. And it was kind of unusual when we took a look at that door that you see on the left there. The door stop on both sides has been cut out about this far on either side of the jamb, which I assume was done to kind of make a wheelchair roll through there, but I don't know that it really works. And it's still not 32 inches of clear space, which is required by the handicap situation. So when we address these restrooms, obviously those doors are going to go away, and we'll use 36-inch doors that will allow a wheelchair to pass through. This is kind of a vision of what can happen with that area. As you can see, the white panels and stuff above would enclose the tops of those restrooms and concession areas and create a nice clean look to the stadium, prevent the birds from being up in there and various things of that nature. The situation there where you see the big DC, that is actually the elevator shaft and a stair tower that goes up to the new press box that we'll talk about a little bit later. But this would really clean up the back side of the stadium and the large expanses of white metal there. Doesn't have to be white, of course, but it does give you an opportunity for some graphics and things of that nature there. And then we kind of created a courtyard around that area there so that if you're down there for concessions, you got a little room to spread out and talk and visit. There's another view of it there. Kind of give you a better look at what the backside of that stadium could look like. As you can see, we've got a lot of canvas there we could use to put graphics and other things on. Okay, this is this is how we approach the stadium from the south parking lot. And the little building you see on the left is the ticket booth. And of course, there's a manhole there, and there's a sewer line that runs north and south right underneath the field. And so it's still an active sewer line, so we were just checking to see what we had there. But as you park and you approach the stadium, you have to climb up these steps to get to the track level, which is the field level. Again, not handicap accessible. So we're looking to do some things there. This is our phase 3, which is an entrance to the stadium. And what we're thinking of is regrading this complete parking lot from the street all the way up to this. And then we would be coming in at grade level, no steps anywhere within the parking lot or the entrance building. This entrance building here could be a ticket outlet, and it's got 2 courtyards on either side, but we also have an idea here for that area as well. If we look at the next slide, we have put restrooms on either side of that ticket outlet, and our thought was we could really create a nice game day experience here with this regraded landscape parking lot with these restrooms. And much like they do at Kansas State University, before the game starts, you can't go into the stadium, so the gates are locked, but the outside two doors on those restrooms are unlocked, so tailgaters can go use the restrooms. Then when it's time for the stadium to open, they lock those two outside doors, and the inside doors become unlocked, and they're stadium restrooms. So it kind of gives us an opportunity to create a real nice game day atmosphere here. And if we look at the, parking lot, I think we're looking at 220 stalls or so. And that's what it looks like right now, as you can see. So it's kind of a haphazard situation, lots of problems with drainage. The surface area of it's not necessarily in great condition and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities here to do some things with that parking lot, maybe make it a really nice situation for people to come a little early to the game and visit and socialize and, pull food out of the back of the car and what have you. This is what it would look like with landscaped areas, and that's another thing that we're trying to address. The city of Dodge has kind of a heat island ordinance about landscaping parking lots to keep from creating a tremendous amount of heat and so forth in those areas. So it makes it a more comfortable space. The area that we see on the left-hand side or the upper kind of corner of that, it looks like a kind of a roof structure. What we're thinking about there is actually, that is where the embankment goes up to the street. We're thinking about taking and excavating that area, putting a retaining wall in, and putting a roof over that area, and for two purposes. One, this would be a place that we could park buses, overnight parking. But the other thing is, and if we looked at that slide before, can you go back to that? See that long skinny rectangle with a little white rectangle beside it, kind of on the left-hand side of that? That's the bus transfer area that you're all probably aware of. And, several hundred elementary students come on a bus and switch buses there. And it's just kind of a fenced-in area. We think that, there's no protection from the heat of the sun in the fall and the spring, no protection from rain, snow, and so forth. So we're thinking that could be enhanced quite a bit by just doing some things for them. Again, giving them an everyday good experience, not just a game day experience, but an everyday experience for those children. So that's kind of what we're thinking there as a possibility. So we've looked at some options there. And as we look at this, we see that behind the stadium is where the buses are parked overnight, and Suburbans and other district vehicles. When we look at doing what we showed you with that plaza and elevator and stair tower on the back of the stadium, which is right behind there, we're going to end up taking up a bunch of that bus parking. As you can see with that little half moon gray area there overlaying some buses. We think that parking lot has the potential, if we can move those buses out to that facility we showed you before or to another location, that parking lot has the potential to be reserved parking, reserved seats, handicap parking, because it's going to be right there where the handicap folks will be able to access an elevator and get into the stadium. So we think that parking lot has a lot more potential than just being bus storage. And so that's another option we think could be explored. The bus barn could stay where it is, and they could still do maintenance on the buses and things of that nature, but it's got some potential there. So we like that idea. Another thing we looked at is behind the East Stadium, we show a parking lot there on what is the blue field, I believe. With the addition of the new artificial turf fields that are going in north and so forth, we may not need that south part of that. It gives us another opportunity for parking that would be for like visitors and have good access to the east stands. As we look at the seating capacity of the stadium and what the regulations are for parking, we need about 1,100 parking stalls. We have 220 in that south lot. We have the north lot north of the baseball field, but people end up parking on the streets and everywhere. So that's a question for you folks. Do you want to explore options to get more parking closer into the stadium? We thought maybe that might be an idea right there as well. And that might also help us get handicapped folks into the East Stadium, because essentially the level of that parking lot hits about mid-level of the stadium. So we could come in with some platforms or whatever that would allow those folks to sit somewhere about mid-level in the stadium. The question is now, how do we get them from there down to the restrooms below? That's where that elevator we talked about earlier might come in. So that's another issue we have in itself right there. But this is a picture of the kiddie corral, as we call it, or whatever. We think that we could do a lot better than that for the kids, and with some ideas that we have there. One thing is just putting a roof over it, so that they don't have to, they may not be there long, but when we talk to bus drivers, they might be there 3 to 5 minutes, depending on whether their bus got there early and the other one was coming late, or whichever school they're going to. So, it might be something that they really could benefit from, is something a little nicer. This, again, is just doing it right there in the same space they're in now, but just putting a roof structure over it. This is, again, showing us the potential of doing a bus shed over there, which the kids could then end up being and waiting for their bus there. Then at the end of the day, the buses can park in there, be plugged in, and they're out of the elements. And so the next morning, they can fire up and head out on their routes again. So that's an idea as well. So we're throwing some ideas at you, some different options, some different things of that nature. So, now, press box. This is the fifth leg, I guess, of the master plan. Presently, we have a press box that is pretty inadequate, not accessible, things of that nature. We did have our structural engineer who has done several press boxes that was listed in the brochure. I think he's done Gowan's Stadium at Hutchison. He's done work at Sterling, various places. He came out and looked at our structure and has looked at the original plans for the concrete supports for that particular situation. And we showed him kind of some ideas we have on what we might be able to do, like this. He says our structural system's good to do that. So it's not going to take additional structural supports other than what we need for stairs, elevator, things of that nature. So the concrete beams and columns that are there are more than adequate to handle a new press box. What we're looking at here is a 2-level press box. The lower level would be take up some of the seats in the stands, but in turn, we're going to make suites there. So they could be, again, another revenue source. Maybe somebody wants to have a suite. And so we have an area there for spectator seating in the lower level. Upper level would be the press box functions. And on either end of that, we have platforms for video, television, whatever, recording of events. We also put a restroom, a handicap accessible restroom, in each level of those 2 levels of the press box and so forth. If we were to use the elevators to access the top level or the middle level, either one, however we work it out, we can then incorporate some seating at the top of the stands for the handicap folks as well. So there's some options there for you as we look at it. And then this is, just an overall view, looking at it, what it would kind of look like, kind of makes a pretty impressive statement there, and so forth. Anything else? Any questions? Anybody have anything they want to ask about this? And if you want to kind of look at what this is, Natalie can kind of rotate this around and fly you around the situation as if you want to look at certain things and what have. One of the things we talked about with this ticket building / restrooms areas, where does that need to be oriented in relation to the stadium? Right now, as this is sitting, we have an access aisle that comes right up to it, a drive aisle really, that lines up with 3rd Street. And so it's offset from the stadium. And then, of course, you have the large scoreboard there. So it's kind of, which place do you put this, And so we ended up leaving it oriented with the street, because I don't think anybody for the city of Dodge wants us to relocate the street intersection. So we kind of laid it out this way, but there's some options there we can talk about as well. Questions?
What do you see as a timeline if you were to do in phases? What would you see as timelines to go?
Well, I guess that's kind of hard to define, but I would recommend we probably look at this as a phased project. Because honestly, if we're talking about trying to accomplish all of this at one time, it kind of would hinder the use of the stadium. And we know it's a busy place between football in the fall and soccer and track and everything of that nature. So if the projects are kind of broke down into smaller pieces, then, we can look at maybe projects that might be as little as 4 months to as long as 8 months or something. And you just have to kind of establish the priorities of what needs to be done and so forth, yeah. The parking lot would be one of those things that you could probably do in a summer and not interrupt any usage there. The work under the grandstands in both areas, as far as restrooms and locker rooms, those are probably fairly small projects. The advantage or the best way to do those is to have the project designed and then bid and all the materials on hand before they start the project. Because we all know, or at least I do from all the years' experience, you'll have delays in certain things that throw your schedule off. So in order to kind of keep your schedule on track, make sure you don't have anything that they're saying, well, we'll have it in 12 weeks and it ends up being 20 weeks, things like that. But yeah. And of course, looking at the overall concept here, it's very early to say what the kind of costs we're talking about, but we're in multiple millions of dollars here. And when I say that, I'm probably pushing towards that $9 million mark for everything we've talked about. For example, just the elevator to service that stadium part there, being a 3-stop elevator with one stop being quite a bit longer than the other, it's a little over $100,000 just for the elevator. Not the shaft, just the elevator.
And you put one on both sides,
That's just one elevator.
but would we require one on the other side as well?
Yeah, I haven't figured out how we may be able to get around that. I haven't really got into that yet. Elevator would be the easiest way to do it. Not necessarily, I don't want to spend that kind of money if I don't have to. But the elevator over there wouldn't be as expensive because it's only a 2-stop elevator. Yeah.
So are you thinking phase 1 is doable with the timeline that we've want by June?
June of this coming year?
For the Shrine Road?
Probably not. It's, it might happen, but I don't know that it can. There's a lot goes on there. But I would say if you're trying to get this ready for the Shrine Bowl, which I know that's what you want to do, I'm not sure that we want to say we can get it done, but we can try, but I'm not sure we can. So I'd hate for us to be all tore up, and then the Shrine Bowl comes around and we're only, halfway there. I think and I know your aspirations is to kind of get that Shrine Bowl on a permanent rotating basis, and I think it's great. I think you'd have a fabulous facility for that. I think possibly by giving them a good master plan and all the ideas and showing them that we're going to accomplish this much this year and the next 2 years we're going to do this, should really carry some weight with those folks. Yeah.
I appreciate you throwing some new ideas at us. I had not even thought about a covered,
Yeah.
that covered on that west side in the parking lot, and then blue field. That's an interesting concept for parking.
Well, and honestly, we don't want you to think that we've kind of pre-designed what the solution should be. We just wanted to throw some ideas that we saw.
Right.
Could be, modified, could be done differently. We've also looked at potentially taking that bus parking or overnight parking and maybe moving it up to the parking lots that are around the Civic Center, or across from the Civic Center, there's a piece of bare ground just south of where the old swimming pool was. There may be a possibility for that. May also be a place that you could do the transfers of the elementary kids there as well. So there are some things we can look at. We know you've got some investment in that bus maintenance facility behind the stadium, so we're not saying that we want to get rid of that, but we're saying we could utilize the parking area on game nights and various things for, maybe some premium parking, yeah. The other thing we looked at, and I think you can see it over here, to the right-hand side is the drive that comes down from the little parking area that's behind the Early Childhood Development Center and all that. That's in pretty bad shape there and needs to be addressed, and we were hoping that possibly if we could put some parking where that ball diamond is and so forth, maybe that parking lot has access to that street, and they don't have to come back through the stadium parking lot, because that's got pretty good grade to that driveway, plus it's in bad shape. So there were some thoughts there as well.
Any other questions?
The only thing you showed on the visitor side stadium with the restrooms underneath, redoing the restrooms, is that correct?
And then we're gonna do a locker room.
And locker rooms.
And locker room, yeah. And then probably just kind of dress up the concession stand. One thing I did fail to mention,
back
there's
would
an
look like-
old steel stairway that's underneath there. Comes out and actually opens up into the practice field area out there behind. It doesn't meet code. It's really a dangerous scenario and so forth. And that's another thing we didn't talk about either, is the railings on the stadium. There's just so many things that the new codes require that you've been able to continue to use because you've not really grandfathered, but you haven't done any major renovations. When we start doing major renovations, they're gonna look at all the code things and start talking about, railings and things of that nature and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can happen up there. But if you're wanting to make this a premier facility, and like I say, a home every third year for the Shrine Bowl, this is where you start, I think.
That brings up a question. Once we, let's say we did phase one, got the restrooms, locker rooms fixed. I mean, once you pull permits and do all that thing, do they come in and say, okay, guys, now you've got to do this, and this to get up to code?
We've talked with the city a little bit about that, and I think they're willing to work with us, and knowing that we've got a master plan, let's say, and they know we can't do all this at one time. So I've had pretty good luck with Kevin Israel and the folks down there at City Hall, and I think that's one of the things that we feel like we could work with them on.
From our conversation, the key is we're committing to a master plan, but the city understands we need to phase it out because we're not using bond money. We're trying to raise capital. So he's exactly right. We need to show the good faith effort that we are making a project out of this.
Not what if 5 years from now you get a board that hates football?
They might like soccer.
That'll never happen in Dodge City.
I would agree.
Pardon?
I said having soccer on your side.
Soccer.
Yep,
There you go.
that's a good point.
Did you find anything, I haven't heard anything mentioned, and it's
Not the
like,
pride
'cause
of
it's
South
not,
Kansas.
the north end of the stadium, going on to Morgan, was there any upgrades or anything that benefit that we could do at that end?
Well, we really didn't address the north end when we looked at this situation, but we know that we've got, a lot of parking and so forth, that people are gonna come from the north end. We may wanna consider whether we need a better pedestrian way from the north and a ticket facility there as well. Those are some things to think about, yes, because obviously we don't have enough land right here to satisfy the parking needs of the stadium. So we know people are gonna have to park to the north, plus you have the practice facilities up there as well. So yeah, we may wanna consider what we can do on that north side to enhance it and make it a good experience coming in there. I mean, I think, we just kind of wanted to kind of address some thoughts that we had. We've been up and spent some time there. We've got our structural engineer spend time there. We've walked the whole facility, so we come up with some concepts and some ideas on certain things. But I think when we talk master plan, we want to start looking at how this is going to relate to the Civic Center and your new administration building, how it relates to the practice fields, how it relates to the other schools that are just across the road. So, yeah, we want to think about all those things in a master plan.
Okay. Any other questions?
Good stuff.
All right, well, we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank
You've
you.
obviously done your homework and have a lot of information on our facility and the district, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. And we anticipate giving the administration direction tonight on which company to pursue, so
And,
Dr. Dirksen will be.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. And like I said, we have put quite a bit of time and thought into this, and it hasn't just been recently. I've been asked by Building Solutions to look at this with them several months back, and we've kind of thrown ideas back and forth, and we've even thrown some budget numbers together, but like I said, they're so early on, we hate to throw those numbers out, but you're talking significant amount of dollars. But I think, in the overall scheme of things, if you can follow all 5 phases of this, you'll have a facility that'll last you as long as the original one is until today. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Natalie, thank you.
Thank you.